I was finishing a late client report when I heard the sharp sound of shoes clacking across the marble floor. Fast, loud, deliberate. The door to my office flew open. No knock, no greeting. Samantha. I looked up from my laptop. Standing in the doorway was Daniel Carter, the newly hired CEO. Slick suit, expensive watch, the kind of overconfident smile that usually comes right before bad news. We need a word, now. He tossed a folder onto my desk. It slid across the polished surface like a challenge. I stayed seated, my hands folded calmly in front of me. Of course, I said, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. Daniel didn't sit. Instead, he leaned forward, both hands pressing down on my desk like he was staking a claim. We're restructuring leadership. Effective immediately. Your position has been terminated. I blinked once. I see. May I ask why? A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. You add absolutely nothing to this company. You're useless. This is a fast-moving business, Samantha. We need leaders, not administrators who cling to old titles and offer no vision. There it was. The kind of statement that hits harder because it's meant to. Dismissive, sharp, final. I could almost hear the imaginary audience gasping if this were a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was real. And I had been waiting for this moment. I nodded slowly. Thank you for your clarity, I said, my voice neutral. Daniel narrowed his eyes, clearly caught off guard by my composure. He'd expected anger, protest, maybe even tears. HR will send your severance package. I'll need your badge and company phone by 5, he added, straightening his tie like a man sealing a victory. I extended my hand. All the best, Daniel. He stared for a heartbeat before shaking it. His grip was firm enough to show dominance. He had no idea. As he walked out, head high, I remained seated, the faintest smile playing on my lips. Because what Daniel didn't know, what nobody in this building knew, was that I wasn't just a department head. 2 weeks earlier, something had changed, and I'd been waiting for the right moment. I glanced at the photo on my desk. My grandfather standing in front of the company's original headquarters, arm around my father. The same company Daniel thought he could toss me out of like dead weight. I ran a finger along the edge of the frame. Wait until the time is right. My father's words echoed in my head. I stood up and began packing my things. I didn't take much. A mug my team gave me last Christmas, a few family photos, and a worn notebook filled with ideas Daniel would never see. Outside, the office buzzed with awkward curiosity. Some colleagues gave me pitying looks. Others avoided eye contact entirely. No one said a word, but I could see the questions in their eyes. What did she do wrong? Why would Daniel fire her? I walked past them all with a soft, polite smile. No fanfare, no theatrics. As I stepped into the bright afternoon sun, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. They thought they had ended my career. But what they had actually done was hand me the opening I'd been waiting for. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and sent a single text to my lawyer. It's time. Notify the board. The reply came seconds later. Understood. The special shareholders meeting will be scheduled within 5 business days. I turned and looked back at the glass-paneled building, its logo gleaming in the sun. Daniel thought this was over. But he had no idea. Because the next time I walked into that boardroom, it wouldn't be as an employee. It would be as the majority shareholder. 5 days earlier, I sat across from Michael Grant, my family's longtime attorney, in his oak-paneled office. A room that smelled faintly of old leather, ink, and quiet power. The kind of office where deals were signed and futures were sealed. On the polished desk between us lay a thick envelope, sealed with a crimson wax stamp I recognized instantly. My father's. Your father left very clear instructions, Michael said, his voice calm, almost ceremonial. This envelope was not to be opened until your 32nd birthday. I glanced at the old grandfather clock in the corner. The long hand clicked softly into place. Noon. It's time, Michael said with a faint smile. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside, a letter written in my father's steady, unmistakable handwriting. Samantha, if you're reading this, it means you've reached an age where you've proven yourself. Not to the world, but to yourself. I never doubted you would. By now, you've worked harder than most ever will. You've been overlooked, underestimated, and you've stayed true to who you are. I'm proud of you. This company was my life's work. And when I stepped down, I retained 90% of the shares, quietly, in a trust, waiting for you to be ready. Those shares are now yours, with full voting rights, effective immediately. I read the paragraph 3 times, feeling the words sink into me like slow-falling snow. 90%. Not a symbolic amount. Not a token share to make me feel important. A controlling interest. My breath caught for a moment. Not out of greed or shock, but because I realized the weight of what this meant. I turned to Michael, holding up the trust documents. Is this legitimate? He nodded once. Absolutely airtight. Your father structured everything to avoid public filings until you chose to act. No one knows, not even the board. I leaned back in my chair, the edges of reality sharpening around me. Why didn't he tell me sooner? I asked quietly. Michael smiled, something almost kind in his expression. Because your father believed you needed to experience the company on your own terms. He wanted you to see who people really were, before you decided whether they deserved your leadership. That hit harder than I expected. For 10 years, I had worked in that company, climbing quietly, getting passed over for promotions I'd earned, watching new male executives, some barely competent, get handed opportunities I'd worked for. I thought patience and hard work would earn me respect. Turns out, I was wrong. What I needed wasn't time. It was leverage. And now, I had it. I want to move carefully, I said, folding the papers neatly back into the envelope. No public announcements yet. Michael nodded. We'll prepare everything. When you're ready, the board can be notified within 2 business days. Good, I said, standing. Because I want them blindsided, especially Daniel. There was a flicker of surprise in Michael's eyes, but it vanished quickly. You've got your father's instincts. I smiled. I've got my own. As I walked out of the law office, the city seemed different. Sharper, more alive. The towering glass buildings that once felt imposing now seemed small. Because for the first time, I wasn't just another name on the payroll. I was the owner of 90% of the company Daniel thought he controlled. The board didn't know. Daniel didn't know. But they would. At the right moment. Back in the present, the afternoon Daniel fired me, I dropped off my badge and phone at HR with a calm thank you and a polite smile. I even shook hands with the receptionist on the way out. No one suspected a thing. Daniel's final words echoed in my mind as I walked through the lobby. You're useless. It was almost funny, because the man who thought I was disposable had just fired his majority shareholder and walked himself straight into his own reckoning. And the best part? He'd invited it himself. By Monday morning, Daniel was already acting like a king. I'd heard from 3 former colleagues. 2 texted. 1 called. Daniel's parading around like he won some big power move. HR's been weirdly tight-lipped. You okay? He's saying you couldn't handle pressure. I replied to none of them. Silence was part of the plan. I wanted Daniel confident. I wanted him convinced I'd disappeared quietly, that I'd accepted my fate without a fight. Let him bask in his false sense of control a little longer. Because the higher he climbed, the harder he'd fall. That afternoon, I sat in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. The kind of place no one from the office ever visited. The smell of fresh coffee hung in the air, soft jazz playing in the background. Across from me sat Michael, his expression calm as ever. Everything's ready, he said, sliding a folder across the table. The shareholder meeting is scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. Formal notices went out this morning. I opened the folder. The papers inside were simple. Stark legal language, direct and precise. Notice of special shareholder meeting. Agenda item. Review and appointment of executive leadership. At the bottom, my signature. This will hit them like a freight train, Michael said quietly. They'll have 2 business days to realize the ground just shifted under them. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Good. He leaned in slightly. You're sure about this? I met his gaze, steady. They pulled the pin the moment they fired me. I'm just handing them the grenade. Michael gave a small nod of approval. Your father would be proud. I wasn't doing this for pride. I was doing it because the company deserved better, because I deserved better, and because Daniel needed to learn what real leadership looked like. Tuesday morning, I met with Caroline Evans, trustee of the shares since my father's passing. Caroline had been with the company since its founding days, sharp, private, with a memory like steel. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. I've watched Daniel dismantle your father's legacy brick by brick, she said bluntly, sliding a thick file across her desk. You don't owe him politeness. Inside the folder was everything I needed. Ownership certificates, voting records, performance reports under Daniel's leadership. And they were worse than I'd imagined. Employee satisfaction down 35%. Turnover rates spiking. Excessive spending on executive perks. Flat revenue growth in a booming market. Caroline's voice cut through my thoughts. He's been hiding behind inflated projections. If this keeps up, he'll run the company into the ground within 2 years. I nodded slowly, absorbing every detail. We'll let the numbers speak for themselves. She gave me a look. 1 part respect, 1 part challenge. It's your company now. How you handle this sets the tone for everything that comes next. I know, I said quietly, and I won't waste the chance. As I left Caroline's office, I walked past the mural in the lobby, an oil painting of my father standing in front of the original headquarters. His hand rested on the shoulder of a small girl in a red dress. Me. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the painting. My father had believed in legacy, not as a monument to the past, but as a responsibility for the future. And even though he wasn't here, I could still feel his hand on my shoulder. By Wednesday morning, the whispers started. Did you hear about the emergency shareholder meeting? Daniel looks nervous. Who called it? The answer was coming, but not yet. I wanted Daniel walking into that boardroom thinking it was just another quarterly review, thinking he still had the room in the palm of his hand. Let him swagger. Let him smirk. Because when the truth hit, it would hit like a lightning bolt. And this time, I wouldn't be the one walking out. Thursday morning arrived sharp and cold, the kind of morning that felt like it belonged to someone else. I dressed with quiet precision, a tailored black suit, clean lines, simple jewelry, the kind of outfit you wear when you walk into a room not asking for power, but owning it. By 8:50 a.m., I was standing in front of the building I'd worked in for over a decade. The same building where I'd been dismissed like a replaceable cog in Daniel's machine. Only this time, I wasn't an employee. I was the majority shareholder. I walked through the lobby without a word. The receptionist froze as I passed. I caught the moment her eyes widened, the split second of recognition before she looked away, uncertain whether she should stop me. She didn't. Upstairs, behind the frosted glass of the boardroom, I could already hear voices. Daniel's among them. Confident, commanding. I didn't break stride. Michael was waiting for me at the elevator, holding a slim leather folder. His face unreadable, but steady. They're all inside, he said quietly. Daniel's already launched into his quarterly strategy speech. I gave a small nod. Not for long. Together, we walked to the boardroom door. I placed a hand on the handle, took a slow breath, and pushed it open. The room fell silent. 10 board members sat around the long oak table. Daniel stood at the far end, mid-sentence, a slide glowing on the screen behind him. When he saw me, his eyebrows shot up. "Samantha," he said, his voice sharp but still coated in smugness. "This meeting is for board members only. You're no longer—" I walked calmly to the head of the table, pulled out a chair, and set Michael's folder down. "Exactly," I said, my voice cool and clear, which is why I'm taking my seat. I sat down, at the head of the table. The shift in the room was instant. Board members exchanged glances. A few leaned forward. One of them, Mr. Callahan, a founding member, adjusted his glasses and glanced at the documents in front of me. Daniel blinked, trying to recalibrate. "Excuse me?" His voice lost a fraction of its edge. I opened the folder and laid out the ownership certificates and trust documents, sliding copies toward the board secretary. "I'm here," I said evenly, "as the majority shareholder of this company, holding 90% of shares, effective as of my 32nd birthday, in accordance with the trust left by my father." A long pause. Mr. Callahan picked up the document and read, his eyes narrowing as he skimmed. "Is this accurate?" he asked quietly. "It is," Michael confirmed, placing another copy in front of him. "The trust is fully executed. All filings have been submitted. Samantha Wren is, by every legal definition, the controlling owner of this company." Daniel let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "This is absurd. You expect us to believe—" "Believe it," I cut in. My voice steady, no louder than before. "Or read the documents yourself." For a heartbeat, Daniel just stared. Then his expression cracked. The disbelief flickered into something else. Fear. I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with him. "You fired me, Daniel. Called me useless. Told me I added nothing." I let the words sink in. "And you did it without knowing you were dismissing the person with the power to remove you. Permanently." A ripple of murmurs ran down the table. "I've called this special shareholder meeting," I continued, "to review the current executive leadership, effective immediately." Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides. "This is a coup," he hissed, "a personal vendetta." I shook my head once. "This is accountability." I slid a second folder across the table, the performance reports Caroline had compiled. Declining profits, rising turnover, excessive executive bonuses, misuse of company funds. I didn't have to explain it. The numbers spoke louder than I ever could. One board member flipped a page and let out a low whistle. Another whispered to the CFO, who immediately pulled out his phone, scrolling with a pale face. Daniel's face flushed. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said quietly. The board secretary looked at me, stunned. You don't need a second vote." "I hold 90%, I replied. "A majority by any standard." Mr. Callahan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. "In accordance with company bylaws, the motion stands, effective immediately." Daniel slammed his palm on the table. "You'll regret this." I met his glare with calm certainty. "I don't think I will." Security didn't need to be called. Daniel walked out on his own, but as he did, I noticed something. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked small. By Monday morning, Daniel's nameplate had been removed from the CEO's office door. I didn't move in right away. I wasn't interested in playing the part of the conquering hero, or in decorating a bigger office to prove a point. I had something more important to do first: rebuild the company my father had started, the company Daniel had nearly destroyed. That same morning, I called an all-hands staff meeting in the main conference hall, a space I remembered mostly for Daniel's grandstanding speeches and empty promises. I walked in alone. No fanfare, no prepared speech. The room was packed, but the front rows remained empty, like no one wanted to seem too eager. Faces watched me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Some arms folded, some eyes narrowed, some heads tilted. They'd seen leaders come and go. They'd seen promises made and broken. They'd seen too much to trust easily. I took a deep breath and spoke the truth. "Some of you know me," I began, my voice steady but real. "Some of you have only heard the stories Daniel told." A few people exchanged glances. But let me start by saying this. I'm not here to take power. I'm here to restore trust. The room shifted. Slightly. Imperceptibly. But it shifted. For years, this company ran on your ideas, your late nights, your belief that what we were building mattered. I paused. And somewhere along the way, that got lost. A quiet silence settled over the room. "I was fired last week," I said, a faint smile touching my lips. Told I wasn't the kind of leader this company needed. That I lacked vision, confidence, assertiveness. A few people chuckled nervously. I didn't fight back, not then, because I knew something Daniel didn't. I let the pause stretch, long enough for it to land. Leadership isn't about volume or vanity. It's about vision, about lifting the people who actually do the work, about respecting those who make this company what it is. I met eyes with familiar faces, engineers I'd collaborated with, assistants overlooked for years, team leads who'd held departments together without recognition. Starting today, everything changes. And it did. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something radical. I listened. I met with department heads, team leads, junior staff, interns, custodial workers. I asked what wasn't working, what they needed, who they thought deserved better. Then I acted. I promoted Mia, a customer service rep who'd quietly been running half her department while her boss took the credit, to head of client experience. I brought back Andre, a brilliant product manager who'd quit after being passed over 3 times for less qualified men. I overhauled HR from the ground up. Every complaint that had gathered dust in some forgotten folder. I read them, investigated them, acted on them. Several toxic mid-level managers were let go within the first week. And then I launched the People First Initiative, a program my father had once dreamed of but never lived to see. A program designed to reward collaboration, promote innovation, and recognize talent, regardless of job title or office politics. No more whisper networks, no more glass ceilings, no more favoritism disguised as leadership. Just good people, doing great work, and finally getting the credit they deserved. Late one evening, I walked the office halls alone. The atmosphere had changed. Laughter echoed from the break room again. Desks were decorated with plants, photos, little pieces of people's lives that had vanished under Daniel's regime. People stayed late, not out of fear, but because they wanted to. On a whiteboard near the engineering bullpen, someone had written in bold blue marker. She came back. 3 simple words, underlined twice. I stood there for a moment, reading it over and over. Not she took over, not she fired Daniel. She came back. And that meant everything. 1 month later, I finally moved into the CEO's office. I didn't change much. I kept the original walnut desk, the broad windows overlooking the city. But I did add one thing, a large framed photo on the far wall, my father and me on the company's opening day. Both of us smiling, both of us hopeful. I placed it behind my chair, not as a monument, but as a reminder. This wasn't just my company now. It was my responsibility. On the first board meeting after Daniel's departure, I stood at the head of the table. The board looked different now. Half the members were women. Several were under 40. People with fresh ideas, diverse perspectives, and a genuine desire to lead with integrity. Before we begin, I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn, I want to thank you. A few eyebrows lifted. For believing in change. For making hard decisions when the easy ones would have been safer. For helping rebuild a company that puts people before power. I paused, letting the moment settle. Someone once told me I lacked leadership. I smiled. But leadership isn't about titles. It's about vision, accountability, and the courage to do what's right. A soft ripple of applause followed. Not loud, but real. As I walked back to my office, I passed through every department, shaking hands, sharing smiles, listening. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about belonging. And finally, after all these years, we belonged.